All right, people, welcome in to this fresh, hot edition of the Sports Card Cowboys. I am your host, Texas Dave from Signed and Slabs, and I'm joined by my partner here, the professor.
Ephus pitch.
All
What's
right.
up, everybody? This is gonna be fun, Dave. I'm looking forward to this.
Listen, people, we'll just get it right out of the way. This is going to be the best hour you've seen all week. As a matter of fact, it reminds me to start the clock. So we're gonna we
got to keep this to an hour.
The professor likes to talk, so I've got to keep. It's my job to keep him on pace tonight, and that's what we're gonna do. So the clock started. I want to make one other point. I've got the good old Crawford Bach. I've got the Jose. That's our nod to the soccer world. And I think it's important that I get in one last comment to see if my soccer friend here my hockey friend here will agree. The Stanley Cup has resided in America so long that I feel like it's now a permanent resident. What say you, Professor?
It's gonna reside the next year again.
So, Cartel, whenever you want to visit the Cup, you know where it is, south of your border. All right. So we're jumping straight in. We're talking baseball tonight. 60 minutes of baseball, just bonanza. But we want to talk about the current players. Now, to set the stage, actually, I think, Professor, you had a couple things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think I can probably set the stage if you want me to.
I get my bottle opener, because like an idiot, I forgot that, and this wasn't
okay.
So hit it, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. So we're really excited to talk about baseball, I think, in part because we don't feel like there's enough voices talking about the game, despite the fact that it's been, kind of the heartbeat and the foundation of the hobby, going back to the early days of collecting pieces of cardboard. And, I think that Dave and I have been spending a lot of time kind of privately through DMs or just chatting about just kind of the current state of the game. And I think one of the things that we want to be able to do today to help you guys, and I'm sure we'll probably help each other as well, because we really haven't kind of prepped each other for what we're going to say, is give you guys a little bit of a reference around kind of where we think we are with the 906 players that currently are in the major leagues. And I think try as best we can to filter that through the lens of what we're experiencing in terms of values relative to historics. Because I think that Dave would agree. I mean, the last couple of years, I think, has distorted to a large degree, call it the sub 25-year-old player in the major leagues, where because so much money has pumped into prospects and some of these younger, flashier guys that are kind of part of the proverbial highlight reel, they've inflated those values in such a way where we will just, I think, voice some degree of caution, even for names that I think are at top of mind for a lot of people today. And that's not to, I think, be critical of the players themselves. It's, I think, more to say that, your dollar means something, and how you place those dollars in this market matters.
Yeah.
And the opportunity cost of getting a few of those things wrong can matter a lot, particularly if you want to view this through the lens of an investment. So,
yeah, massive. All right. So with that preface, we'll preface one other thing. So historically, there have been really two main qualifications to reach the Hall of Fame. Whether you were a hitter or a pitcher. And I think it's important to delineate the overwhelming number of people in the Baseball Hall of Fame fall as a player. There are some umpires, coaches, a few others, but Bill, you had that stat. How many Hall of
Yeah,
Famers are there in total?
There actual Hall of Fame players, Dave. There's 268.
Okay, 268 players. As a hitter, there have traditionally been two metrics that were essentially auto enshrinement. The first was 3,000 hits. The second, for a long time, was 500 home runs. Now, there have been some obvious exclusions from that. Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame. Rafael Palmeiro, who has both of those accolades, is not in the Hall of Fame. Alex Rodriguez is very likely to not be in the Hall of Fame. But traditionally, those are numbers that have mattered, and the two hitters we all know will be coming up, Pujols and Cabrera, both members.
Can I add one more to that, even though it's going to annoy you in terms of a third barometer? Because I think it's helpful
for hitters or for just for hitters.
Well, I think it would be applicable for hitters and pitchers.
Well, let me finish pitchers, because there's two that have been auto for pitchers: 300 wins or 3,000 strikeouts. Are automatic enshrinement if you hit one of those. So
this is going to annoy you. This is going to annoy you a bit, but I think because I think that part of what we're going to talk about today is, making sure that people kind of understand that one of the things, and it speaks to what you just mentioned, Dave, right? Which is that continued performance matters, right? And obviously the only way to get to
sport, no matter how
it's an accumulator sport, almost more than almost any other sport that's out there, right? I mean, and so I think the other kind of helpful statistic, while it's become fairly commonplace today, is WAR, because it can be attributable to both pitchers and hitters. And I'd say that the magic bogey, if you look at just the stats around who's in the Hall of Fame, tends to be in the high 50s to 60. So that's another kind of good barometer. And one of the things that I always tend to look at is, instead of where somebody sits kind of from a total WAR perspective, what their WAR is on a per 162 game basis. Because I think, and maybe we'll get into this, but one of the things I've always thought to myself is, in order to kind of ascertain where you think a player is kind of going, one of the things to think about is, like, I think that we would both agree that if a player had 12 to 15 healthy seasons, they've had a successful major league career, almost irrespective of their stats, right? They just have been on a Major League Baseball roster for that period of time, right? And what I would suggest is that, call it 60% of a player's WAR typically is derived through their top 5 seasons of that 12 to 15, right? And then the rest, you're just kind of scraping by with a couple WAR a year.
Yeah.
In the case of a Miguel Cabrera, his WAR has been literally almost even to slightly negative the last 6 seasons, for an example, even though he's played in some cases over 100 games a year.
Yeah. And
so I think that, we'll talk about some specific names around this, but I do think it's important for people, as they start to kind of particularly make some sizable, bets on some of these players. I would say bets versus investments, particularly for ones that really haven't kind of come into their own. I do think it's important for people to understand that, if you've got to get at, call it 35 of your WAR, if you got to get, call it 6 to 7 WAR a year for 5 years, there's some very popular players like an Acuna that haven't even done that yet.
Right.
They haven't what I mean? They haven't done it once. And you got to do it 5 or 6 times to get into the Hall of Fame. So anyway, I think it'll be helpful as we go through some of this stuff to level set around that. But I do think that framing it that way is important, because I think the thing that's existent today that I think hasn't, which I think you can speak to with a lot more specificity as we go, is I do think there's kind of a lot of like front end loading that's happening around prices, where certain players like a Bo Bichette, for example, like he's being priced as if he's kind of on the Hall of Fame path. And like he's so far removed from that, it's like kind of scary.
Yes.
Right. Whereas like a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, who I think if he can pull together an MVP this year or get top three in the
We're gonna
voting,
talk about him. He's on my list.
right? But I guess what I'm saying, just a level set with people, like he's a guy who's like completely out of the hobby's mind, but could be well on his way to having a Hall of Fame career. So anyway, let's get into the specific names, but I do think it's helpful to
we have those stats. We're going to come back to them as we talk, because I think they're important to kind of frame up where some of these guys are. So I always look, no secret to anybody, from a Hall of Fame perspective, from a baseball overall perspective, hitters are just more popular than pitchers. It's just how it is. The chicks dig the long ball. People like to see bats on leather. They don't like seeing leather on leather all the time. So, look, we'll start out with the hitters. So I think as of today, there are 3 current Hall of Famer locks that are currently playing in the major leagues. Do you know who they are? Of course you do.
3
hitters that are locks right now, never play another game they're in.
Albert Pujols, Miguel
Cabrera,
Mike Trout.
No.
Yes.
Yadier Molina.
Well, fine, but Trout's there too.
Trout may be there.
No, he's there.
Well, we'll get to him.
Okay.
We have 3 for sure. Right? Pujols and Cabrera are in. Unless they get popped with some roid stuff. But it seems like we're probably past that.
Okay.
Right? Now, just for reference sake, Pujols' WAR is over 99. And traditionally, in the history of baseball, a 100 WAR puts you in the top 25 players all time. So I think everyone needs to think about that for a minute. I, as Bill knows, am not a huge Pujols fan. I feel like, but I cannot deny that he's been one of the greatest hitters ever. And I was shocked his WAR was that high, because he plays literally zero defense. But the stats are what the stats are. I don't think it's a question of whether he's one of the greatest hitters ever. He is. Cabrera's WAR is approaching 70, which is quite high, easily above the range. Now, what's interesting is the top 100 hitters in the Hall of Fame have WARs of effectively 56 and higher. So again, I think that solidly substantiates Cabrera, where, if anyone really had any question, those questions go away. Molina, on the other hand, becomes one of those guys where I think he's going to get in at a position that historically WARs wouldn't necessarily be as high. There's a big defensive element to it, but this is a guy that has been literally the best catcher in baseball for as long as anyone can remember. And so
since Pudge Rodriguez, for sure.
Yeah, right. But Pudge's offensive stats far superior to Yadi's. But Yadi's been an icon. And so I think he's somebody that he makes it just on the all-around game. Because even in his compiling, he may not be where he needs to be.
Well, I think he gets it because I think the Hall of Fame is underweight catchers.
Yeah, for sure. There are 2 positions that are significantly underweight compared to the others, and they come in at 2/3 or less of every other spot. That's catchers and third base. All right, so let's get to our list of who's up next. And for this, the stats help to tell a story, I believe. So for 3,000 hits, there are 33 humans ever in the history of the game to do that. 33. Pujols and Cabrera are two of them. All right. Now, if I dropped that 3,000 down to 2,500, there are still only 100 humans that have gotten to 2,500 hits. Because,
Well, and I think, and just to level set on that, Dave, out of that 100 is out of the 222,718 players that have ever played, right?
yes, 100. And as a matter of fact, I picked one guy out to just shock you with it. Bill Buckner has over 2,700 hits in his major league career. He's 66 all time. And that's not someone anyone thinks about as being a Hall of Famer, right? 2,700 hits. So keep that number in the back of your mind as we start working through some of these folks. So it's like, so basically the question becomes, who's up next? Robbie Cano is a name that's out there, but he's deeply into the performance enhancing world, right? I think there's zero chance he gets to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think the only way that he pierces the veil is if the Hall of Fame somehow just kind of capitulates on all those players, which would be he'd be the last guy on the list after Bonds and A-Rod and Palmeiro and all the rest of them. So yeah, I think that's right.
Nelson Cruz, same thing. Now he hasn't even gotten to 2,000 hits yet. He does have 450 plus homers, but he also served a 50 game. I think he have a 50 game suspension previously in his career. So like he's just that shroud is over him as well. And I'm not sure he was even there anyway. Now, I mean, so a couple interesting things on these guys though. Robbie Cano's WAR is almost 70, Bill. Which is
he was a good player for a long time, man. He was a good player for a long time.
Cruz is only 43. So he was kind of borderline coming into.
I just think Cruz is just not. I mean, whether or not he hits 500 home runs or not. I mean, and if you stripped away the PED thing, he's just not collectible.
He's Gary Sheffield.
Yeah, well, I like Gary Sheffield a lot.
I know. But, all right, so next guy's up then. Joey Votto, nearly 2,100 hits, 330 plus homers. His WAR is almost 65, but he's also 38.
He's a lock.
You think he's a lock?
Yeah.
I think he is beloved, but I am not a believer.
Really, I think he's a lock.
Yeah. I think he'd need 3 more decent seasons, and I think that's tough ask for a 38-year-old. Unless you chunk him over into the AL and I guess now it doesn't matter, right? I guess
he's been a very good defensive player. He's beloved by other players.
But is he great? The stats say he's not great.
Yeah, but there's Hall of Famers that you wouldn't. I mean, there are some Hall of Famers
Not many, dude.
Okay, well, I think
but for our conversation here, how collectible is Votto?
I think he's more collectible than you think. I think fans love that guy. I don't think his market is like deep. Like I don't think there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to be clamoring for second or third year gold refractors of his or whatever. But I think there's enough demand for some of his top rookies, although he was kind of in like the dead era of collecting.
Yeah.
But I think there's a market there. I mean, here, put another way, I'd feel a lot better spending, $600 to $700 on one of his, call it top tier rookies, which I would believe is what it would take to get, versus, Tatis.
Yeah.
Right now. Really a lot of these younger guys. I mean, Soto's hitting 215 now, and again, like he put it together last year at the end of the year and salvaged the season, but like
Well,
You
so
know,
let's come
it
back
took.
to the current guys. We got them on the back end of this.
Okay, well. But at the same time, though, I think it's important to juxtapose these players to people that we're going to talk about next. I think Joey's, a fan. Fans love him. He's a very likable guy. Players love him. Coaches love
Yeah,
him.
the question is how hobby relevant is he? For me, he's not. I've never owned one and would never consider owning one. But
I think there's a place for his cards.
okay.
I'm not running out. I'm not running out to buy him, but I think there's a
Yeah.
place for a guy like that.
I mean, look, he's got his WAR's almost 65, so there's a lot there. And I've been, to kind of end the discussion on him. Votto reminds me a lot of a Scott Rowland type. And
Yeah.
so I guess if I'm going to trumpet the Scott Rowland horn, and I'm doing that only because I think he's going to get there, not because I necessarily felt like he ever was a true Hall of Famer. I knew he was really good, but I probably never thought of him that way. If Rowland's a Hall of Famer, I may have to roll back my opinion of Votto to put him in that conversation. So
I mean, look, here's the thing, Dave. He's in an air shot of 70 WAR. If he gets to 70 WAR, he's a lock. I'm sorry, I don't care what you say. He's just a lock.
Yeah. All right. So our next guy's up. These I'm going to bucket these three because their rookies are all essentially the same year, and one of these guys is going to surprise you.
Okay.
And I'm, to be clear, I'm going on people in terms of where they stand in active career hits.
Okay? Yeah. Sure. Yep.
So next up we have Jose Altuve, 1,800 plus hits, 43 WAR. Freddie Freeman, approaching 1,800 hits, 45 WAR, and a dark horse, Eric Hosmer, is going to pass 1,700 hits. Now, the problem is he's only got a 19 WAR. But all these guys are 32 years old. So they're possibly.
Hosmer, there's no way. Hosmer doesn't have enough juice.
But I'm just saying they're in the middle of or towards the back of their prime, maybe accumulation or prime performance phase. I think all three of these guys, I mean, Altuve and Freeman, certainly it's not outside shots. I mean, unless they get hurt, they're going to get to 2,500 plus hits each.
Yeah.
And they're going to get well around 50 plus WAR. Hosmer a little bit more difficult, and Hosmer is just a name that I think, unless you're a complete baseball nerd, you would have never even put on these lists. And I didn't, outside of actually I knew who he was because of the set collecting around 2011.
That's like a bar. It's like a bar trivia question in Kansas City.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the question, how do you feel about those guys for ultimate Hall of Fame consideration?
I think that Altuve will make the Hall of Fame. But there'll be people that will go to Cooperstown just to boo him. And I really mean that. So I think he'll make it. I actually think that he'll play a lot longer than people think he will. Like, I think he's a lot more durable than people think. And I think that he actually could make a really good DH later in his career because of his approach at the plate. So I think he's a lock. I think his collectability will be kind of forever tarnished outside of the confines of the Houston MSA because of that fateful season.
Unless they win another one. What if they win another one?
I don't think it matters.
Really?
Honestly,
you think if they win and drop the win down this year, which would be what, their fourth trip, and they get it even at 2-2?
I think you know almost better than most. I mean, baseball fans have longer memories than any fan base, any any professional sport that exists.
Yeah, no, they do, so I don't want to spend a ton more time on him, but
So I think that's Altuve. That's my thoughts on
yeah,
Altuve.
what I would remind everyone is like, yeah, the Astros ended up being the sacrificial lambs for that, right? So I'm going to
Yeah,
make sure we say it here. The 2018 Red Sox were cheating just as much. So if you want to feel like, and I love Mookie Betts, but if you want to feel like Betts and JD Martinez and that whole crew was innocent in all this, they were not innocent in it. They just didn't have to talk because somebody at the league office decided F the Astros. So anyway,
well, I think there's some things. I think
speaking
there's
of
some funny
Fs, we'll
business.
move on to a guy who has two Fs, Freddie Freeman.
So I think Freddie Freeman is. I think Freddie Freeman is going to get in as well. He's beloved by Braves fans, despite I think some of the awkwardness of how he wound out of Atlanta. I think that most Brave fans still view him extremely favorably. I think he's kind of putting together a typical season with the Dodgers, and I see no reason why, to your point, he can't kind of repeat that for 3 to 4, maybe 5 years. I think the DH helps him quite a bit as well. It just seems like he's going to be kind of a guy on that podium. I don't think that he is collectible as people think he is. I think he's the type of player, almost more so than Altuve, believe it or not, that people will just kind of forget about. Part of that is because I think that he just doesn't have. I mean, he's like a nice guy, but he doesn't have like this like dynamic personality. He just kind of strikes me as somebody that he'll retire and like 6 years from now, people won't even like mention his name type thing.
Yeah.
Like a light bulb will go. I mean, it's kind of like Jeff Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell is a beast. And, I'm sure that you remember his years in Houston with a lot of fondness, as I do. But like, how many times have you ever heard somebody say like, "Oh, I'm a Jeff Bagwell collector"?
No, I mean, look, for us, it was difficult because like we were in that era of Biggio Bagwell, and Craig got to 3,000, so it was clear he was going to make it. The question was, where was Bagwell going to end up, because he was missing the major career accolade, and really kind of finished with a whimper. But his appeal and his history of treating the media well ultimately played in his favor. And I think some people probably overlooked some stuff that, for other guys, such as Barry Bonds, they were not as willing to overlook.
Yeah.
So
and
no,
Hosmer's not worth talking about. Hosmer's not worth talking about.
No, not at all. But in terms of cards, so for Altuve and Freeman, the only reason I also find them relatively significant is they were part of that 2011 update set. So they have the parallels, et cetera, that the Trouts also have. So while neither one of those cards are going to be considered iconic the way that the Trout is, there is some good sort of comparison there, I think, and some good, not just from style of card, but also ultimately from a pricing perspective, I think could give you some ideas. Now, what's interesting is like Freeman had Bowman Chrome autos, I believe, as well, right? The drafts and et cetera. Altuve came out of nowhere, so there's no rookie autographs of any of his stuff. So if you want them, you got to put them on aftermarket, which guys like me do, because that's my hometown dude.
Yeah.
All right, so that leads us to one of your obviously favorite players. He's getting his 15 minutes right now. Paul Goldschmidt has checked in at 1,650 hits, nearly 300 homers. His WAR is 54. This is a guy that like had been out of hobby spotlight and maybe out of baseball highlight, and then he relocates.
Right.
Boy, St. Louis will do it for you, won't they?
Yeah. No, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, look, I think there's going to be some people that are going to be pissed when I say this. I think he's a better player than Freddie Freeman. I think that
He's a little bit older. That's what's going to hurt him. But,
yeah,
from the WAR conversation, Goldie's been in the league 12 years. He got started. He's 12 years and he's 34. Freeman's been in 13 and he's 32. And Goldie's got 9 more on him already. So, like, there's an indication there that at least on that stat metric, you're right. Goldie's actually a better player.
Yeah. I don't think
really he is good of an accumulator.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that really for all of these guys so far, with maybe the exception of like a Pujols that we've already talked about. I mean, Cabrera, I guess maybe to a certain degree. I think it's hard to be. I think it's hard to be a player collector for these guys if part of your, call it, mindset is that you want to, at some point, for whatever reason, collect these things and sell them, and those things not go to kind of zero.
Yeah.
So like I guess like part of this conversation is like, if you want to collect Paul Goldschmidt because you think he's a great player, like by all means do it, right? If you have like some part of your some part of yourself that says, if you wake up one day and your kid hates cards, and they're just kind of collecting dust, and you want to do something with them, you're probably going to feel a little bit better about yourself if you can actually sell those things for some modicum of value.
Yeah. Well, look, I think historically what we've seen on guys like this is there's a huge benefit from the collecting point of view if a guy sort of stuck around no more than maybe 2 teams over a career, right? And so looking back across part of this list, that's something that a guy like Yadi Molina, pretty easy, right? Joey Votto, pretty easy. Altuve's been in one place. If Freeman can sort of stick in LA, he probably falls into that. Maybe if Goldie can have a couple good seasons here, he could change that trajectory. But it's tough, man. He's 34. Like that, when you haven't quite made it by then, there's a chance you're not gonna make it. And by make it, we mean from a hobby perspective. So I don't know. We'll see. But this season could certainly, if he can keep it up, man, it'll open some eyes.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And again, I think if he keeps it up, I think he's likely well on his way to the Hall of Fame. And but again, there are a lot of players, if you kind of take the roids out of it in the years that are fond to us, like, are any of the guys that we've talked about better than Frank Thomas at first base?
No.
Not even close.
No, they're not.
Like, outside of Frank Thomas's card that's an error, like, can you name his best card and what it trades for?
It's probably some freaky insert that only Joey Peapod knows that there's 3 of in the universe, right?
right. And there's probably 5 people that want that card, and 3 of them already own it.
Right? 5 total people, yes.
Right.
All right, our next pair. I'm putting these guys as a pair because this again in my research, it was actually shocking to me, which just shows maybe I'm not as deep into the stats I need to be. Your beloved Mike Trout is nearly at 1,500 hits. But interestingly enough, the guy just above him on the active hits list is Manny Machado at 1,508.
Yeah.
And even more shocking, Machado has been in the league 1 year less, and he's actually a year younger. Machado's 29, Trout's 30.
Yeah. Yeah, who do we talk about first? I was
looking at this list and thinking about these players, and the first guy that jumped out at me as, I'm not sure these prices actually maybe reflect just how good he might actually be, is Machado.
I would agree. And I tell you, and I tell whoever's going to listen to this, I've been on the hunt for one of his SP rookies for some time now. There's one on eBay. It's him in a black Orioles jersey, kind of throwing. You've probably seen it, like kind of throwing from the ground.
Yeah.
It's a horizontal card. I'm not quite sure if the print run, but it's a rare card. I think the pop is pretty damn low. I will own that card, have it in my collection. I do think he's criminally kind of undervalued and underappreciated. Part of the fact, I think, was because he spent so much time in Baltimore.
Yes, gosh, like what?
I mean,
I worry about him from the changing of the team's perspective.
No, I do too. I do too.
It erodes collector value. I think.
I agree. I agree. But I do think that given his age, and notwithstanding this latest ankle injury, which thankfully doesn't look to be as bad as it said.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, if he puts together 5 or 6 more years of this stuff, he's gonna be right in that conversation. And I do think, again, on a relative value basis, he's criminally undervalued, particularly as it relates to some of the players I'm sure we'll talk about here in a bit.
Yeah, listen, he's halfway to the major stats, right? Because he has 263 homers.
What's his WAR?
49 plus.
Yeah.
So I mean, Machado's a guy that's well on his way, and I was surprised that where he was, in relation to Trout. So now Trout is in at an 80 WAR currently. He's got 331 homers. I think at this point, Trout, unless something, and even if something freaky happened, he probably is still a Hall of Famer. And I mean, listen, let's be honest. He's legitimately this era's, in the last 15 years of baseball, like this is the best player. And there is no close second, even though I'm giving you stats about Machado that might actually indicate it's closer than anyone would have thought.
You're looking at hits.
I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at hits, homers. I'm looking at
what's his OPS?
WAR.
Machado. What's Machado's OPS?
I don't have it written down.
I mean, look, to me, if he stopped right now, if Trout stopped right now, he's Joe DiMaggio. He's Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio has a 79 WAR. He has 2,200 hits. He has 360 homers.
Yeah, but Joe DiMaggio
has got an OPS plus of
what? 6 World Series.
Yeah, he played for the Yankees.
Trout's only been to the World Series if he bought a ticket.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just saying.
That's the argument I've been having this week about. I think Trout's question is really where is he going to ultimately fall all time. I do think right now his all time. The way ESPN and other people rate him, I think is way too high. They're doing another 5 to 7 years of projection to put him in those places. He is not a top 25 hitter as we sit here right here today. But if I project out on him, look, if he nearly doubles what he's sitting at, he'll be close to 3,000 hits and or maybe get there. He'll have 600 homers, right? We got another guy on this list, sounds a whole lot like that, doesn't he? Those are pretty similar stats to what Albert's accumulated. So, and Trout's another guy, right? Not a ton of DHing yet. So is that somebody that, as he gets another 5-6 years in, moves over to the DH side, I think he could elongate his career with that. So, but anyway, those are the two guys. Like when I look at this list, Trout's pretty expensive, right, Bill? You got to be kind of picky. There's a lot of cards out there on him. I think you got to be selective. But I'm not sure that they're necessarily overvalued at this point. If you look at it through the lens of that's gonna be the guy, right? So if you were gonna own one baseball card as a basketball collector, that's the dude, which means there's gonna be demand for him for a long time, no matter what. And if he ends up getting pretty high in those all-time ranks, it's possible his prices will actually look cheap.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody knows I'm in the tank for this guy. I think I've been fairly clear about my views on him and where he places all time. I do think it's, you know, he's the best baseball player since I think Ken Griffey Jr. I think to the extent to which he shows himself to be more durable than Ken Griffey, he will far exceed Ken Griffey's imprint on the game from just a production standpoint.
But someone
And
made
I
a good
think,
point about Griffey. Griffey was a cultural icon. Like
yeah,
now, and he wasn't a willing one, but Nike managed him great. That was a point that a couple of my friends made to me because I said, you know, Trout's not really out there the same way. If he were, or if he started to do that more, I think you'll see that shift quickly. But Mike doesn't seem to be interested in that stuff. He feels like he wants to play baseball, and when he's not playing, he wants to kind of be left alone. And that's okay.
I think that it would be no small feat to say that Ken Griffey Jr. was the greatest ambassador baseball ever had. I mean, I know that comes like with a pretty heavy weight to it, but like here is the guy that picked up the phone and called then commissioner of baseball and said we should all wear 42 for Jackie Robinson, right?
Yeah.
He was a guy who broke down barriers that existed in baseball between the kind of old heads and the new folks in the hobby in a way that nobody else could have done.
But he had a great, great smile, great charisma, like all that.
Just an incredibly charismatic and a guy who just operated with the highest sense of integrity, honestly.
Yeah. Right. No, 100%. I mean, with the steroid stuff, you know, some of that story as it involved him, and he, you know, he was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, no, I'm not doing that stuff. Like, that's not how the game's played. We cheapen it for everybody if we do that.
Well, and can you imagine what his stats would be if he wasn't playing against a bunch of roided out pitchers?
Yes.
Anyway.
All right. So the next guys on my list, we're gonna bang through quickly. I'll take these three as a group: JD Martinez, Anthony Rizzo, and Nolan Arenado. The only guy here that interests me too much is probably Arenado. But again, I think I'm also, you can tell I favor a little bit these third basemen because of their underrepresentation in the Hall. I think that there's a chance that some of these guys end up being able to get in, even if they haven't accumulated necessarily the big banger stats. You know, JD Martinez, a little bit older. He's 34, although he's having a heck of a season. And then Rizzo, to me, is just an interesting one as a guy that looks to going to be involved in another big playoff run, and as one of the key, you know, cornerstones for the Cubs breaking that curse. Like, I mean, man, if Rizzo got into the playoffs again and kind of was a banger in New York, like, does he kind of toss off a little bit of the view of not necessarily being elite, but certainly being a leader? Or do you think it just becomes kind of right place, right time? And keep in mind too, he also won a Baseball Man of the Year, that's a big deal too.
Yeah, I mean, Rizzo's an interesting one. I think that I think you're right about kind of his postseason success, his tie back to the Cubs. I think that you're also right to say that, you know, if he gets back in the postseason again and has a few highlights, you know, like kind of an Ortiz, you know, I think that'll just, particularly in a place like New York, that'll stick with him forever. I think the other thing that people, and I mentioned this in my stories the other day, you know, I think a guy like Rizzo benefits greatly from the shift going away.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And, you know, just if let's say that he picks up 20 or 30 hits a year, right? I mean, all of a sudden, maybe he's hitting, instead of hitting 280 or 275, he's hitting 290, maybe 300. Yeah. I mean, I think those things, matter. Again, I mean, how deep is the Rizzo market? no
I mean,
deeper than the Freddie Freeman market, right?
no
No deeper
doubt. And
than
again, that it's a guy that when I was looking at the list, I kind of said to myself, well, this is someone I'd been interested in before, but then the Cup thing wore off. But now he's kind of, you know, he's around. The Yankees are playing really like elite level baseball. Like, is this a guy that, in the right circumstance, you could kind of have a revival and ends up being somebody that people are like, yeah, maybe this makes sense. Now, one of the things I think hurts him, his rookie card is a Brewers card.
yeah.
So
Well, here's the other thing though, Dave. I
that,
mean, this is something. Here's the other thing though, Dave, and this is something maybe we can talk on a different episode, but I think it's helpful as we frame this for people. Because we're just kind of we're fixating on just kind of where players are at and relative value and all the rest of it, and we're talking at times around kind of collectability, right? But like for me, if like Anthony Rizzo, if I only want one of his cards,
yeah,
he's not collectible.
yeah, agreed.
He's not collectible, right? And so like, because he kind of lives and dies on that card, right? Like,
Right. So from that perspective, actually, the next guy up makes more sense. Bryce Harper hauls in next, and like that's a guy where I think it's, hey, if you collect, he's the equivalent in baseball of the Brady Manning concept in football. I think like if you collect Mike Trout and you need somebody else, Harper's the natural choice. It's all basically the same cards. You can get your pairings up and feel pretty good about it. That's another dude who's having a great freaking season. I think what hurt Harper over time was just the hype coming into it, but he's got a lot of baseball to go. And I think as he's kind of shut his mouth more and just played, like it's actually benefited him huge, right?
I totally agree, man.
Yeah.
Look, I think I would say this. I mean, I'm particularly as the market has been in a little bit of a free fall. I'm allocating a lot more dollars at Bryce Harper than I am at Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cheap.
It has no reflection on what I think about Mike. And obviously I've got most of my collection in baseball is Mike, as you know. I just think that Harper is so criminally undervalued, particularly as it relates to some of the guys that we'll then talk about, that it's just kind of crazy. I mean, I'm buying like his gold refractors for like $50.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of value there. That's the sort of value play, right?
Yeah.
I'll finish off this list of hitters just because I had them. I don't really think we need to talk about any of them. Giancarlo Stanton, Mike Stanton, Bogarts. It surprised me he had more hits than I thought he would. Mookie, and then Lindor. And just for reference, Lindor's only got 1,000 hits, so I don't think but he's the youngest guy on this list. Man, I thought he was going to be good this year, and he sure looked good for a while, and then I don't know, he put
you forgot. I think you forgot somebody on that list.
Who?
Aaron Judge.
He's nowhere near. Aaron Judge doesn't even have 700 hits.
I'm telling you.
But I'm telling you, he doesn't even have 700.
I understand what you're saying, but I think if the guy averages 7.6 WAR a season, dude.
But Bill, he's not going to play long enough. He's just not going to play long enough.
He plays for the Yankees.
It's not going to matter.
I disagree.
It's not going to matter.
I disagree. I think he's criminally undervalued.
Hold on. Did I have my stat on that? Shoot, I didn't write it down. I did look up lowest number of hits to actually make it in the Hall of Fame, and I think it's questionable whether Judge will even get there. But you guys, there's your research project. Go prove why I'm wrong. All right, we're moving on to pitchers.
Do we have to talk about pitchers? Honestly, like I think that's kind of we can talk about like Verlander and like
pitchers are pretty short, right? So I think you've got.
I'm just saying, like, I think for our audience, like what they're going to want to know, what they're going to really care about, because how much time are we at right now?
48.
Yeah, we got 12 minutes. We got to talk about these young players.
But
That's
I
what people
love
care
pitchers.
about.
I'm not going to allow not talk about pitchers. Pitchers are the best players in the game. Doesn't mean
So
they're the most
say what you need to
they're the
say in 2
best.
minutes. I'll shut up.
All right. So I think you've got 4 Hall of Fame pitchers on the way: Verlander, Greinke, Scherzer, Kershaw. Greinke's a guy that people are going to debate, but when you look at his stats and you look, he's at a 74 WAR. He's actually the highest WAR of all those 4 guys. He's approaching 3,000 Ks. I don't know that he racks them up enough to get there, but those 4 guys are going to make it. The next guy that's sort of borderline for me, but I could see people getting behind it, was Wainwright. I think he needs a little more accumulation maybe to be in that discussion. Now, some of the research I did was saying Madison Bumgarner was somebody who was going to make it. From a statistical point of view, he's actually not very good. He's only got 130 wins, not even 2,000 Ks, but it'll come here shortly. His WAR's under 40. Other than the postseason dominance, I don't know that Mad Bum was actually that great of a major league pitcher.
He just had, I mean, the thing about pitchers, I would say, is like the challenge with collecting pitchers, or, you know, quote unquote, making bets on pitchers, is that most of their shelf lives are just very, very short. And so, like, you can have a guy like Tim Lincecum who comes out and just
the world on fire,
lights the world on fire for 2 or 3 years, and then like 4 years later, like you don't hear about him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A pitcher. So a pitcher that I think, this is actually the guy I think has the last shot at getting to 3,000 Ks, is Garrett Cole. He's got almost 1,800. He's got 123 wins. His WAR is only 33, but that, you know, that probably moves up pretty quickly in the current world. So we'll see what happens with him. He's an interesting one because I'm not sure how likable he is. But man, when that guy was on, he was dominant. But you know, again, sort of scandal from using the hand, you know, sticky crap. The other guy that people talk a lot about, Jacob deGrom. He currently has 77 wins, 1,500 Ks. He's got a 42 WAR, so he's obviously been super dominant. But here's, I think, the challenge, and I picked out 3 guys quickly of who he really is. So the obvious one is Roy Halladay, right? Well, Halladay had 200 wins and over 2,000 Ks. So it wasn't like he was a bum. He was pretty good. There's no way DeGrom's winning 200 games.
No.
All right, the next 2 guys. We'll go with a big name, Sandy Koufax. Didn't even have a 50 WAR, only 165 wins, 2,300 Ks. But similar to DeGrom, there was a 4 or 5 year stretch where you're like, this is the best pitcher in the league, and there's probably not a ton of argument about it.
Yeah.
But here's who DeGrom really is. Another former Met, Dwight Doc Gooden.
Yeah.
Had a 53 WAR, 194 wins, and 2,300 Ks, which is not too far off what DeGrom may actually project to in the end. So the question then becomes, if the Doc ain't Hall of Fame, is DeGrom Hall of Fame?
No.
I think no, because I think he's not even going to get there. But his stuff's expensive, Bill. I looked him up because I was like, how much of his do his cards go for? It was a lot more than I thought. But to your point, I'm not sure there's a ton of collecting to do around the pitchers. I think that need to be more of just, you like somebody or you're kind of player collecting. I do think there's some value probably in Verlander, Scherzer, and Kershaw, just because you've got
I agree.
Postseason success there. I mean,
you know what it reminds me of, like,
you know, of that generation.
You know what it reminds me of in a different sport? It's like collecting wide receivers.
Yeah.
You
But
know
now
what I mean?
the wide receivers are getting paid. Who knows?
Well, I'm just saying, like, you know, you would never fault somebody for being like a Jerry Rice collector.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And like if I ran into somebody 5 years from now and like they backed up the truck and they bought like every cool Clayton Kershaw card they could find, a guy who's got 3 Cy Youngs and an MVP award,
And he's
You know,
likable.
and he's a likable guy. He's a World Series champ. I mean, like it's really hard to fault somebody for that because frankly, the values are just so
Yeah.
criminally low versus some of these hitters that we're talking about. But
Yeah. All right. So transitioning to guys that weren't on the list. You kind of so this was more of like the under 25 types, right? But I'm going to throw two dudes at you that I'm just interested to know what you think of them. Salvi Perez doesn't get a lot of talk. He's a pretty dang good player, man. And then the other one's Pete Alonso, the polar bear, having a great season. He was a darling 3 years ago, and the problem was when he came out, there were about 4 million of each of his cards. Can those guys find relevance or no?
no,
You don't think so?
no chance.
All right.
I could name 20 players in the 90s that are much better players than them that have literally zero collectability.
Yeah. All right. So list of the under 25 guys. Soto, man, started fast, but gosh, this year looks bad. Hopefully it's an anomaly.
Yeah.
Acuna's been hot. Dude seems like he's back. It was kind of a freaky injury. It did hurt missing that World Series though, man. I think that would have been the guy if he'd have played in that World Series. That'd have been the guy we were talking about. I think his price would be equivalent to Soto's, if not for that. Tatis, we'll have to see when he gets back. As you know, I'm worried about Tatis long term. I think that the arm thing creates a big problem, or the shoulder deal, and it's not just for fielding because he pops the stupid thing out the way he hits. So unless he does something to change how he hits, I think we're actually going to see Fernando fade pretty quickly from the spotlight, which is sad because he's a fun guy to watch, and super charismatic, right? Vlad, Bichette, I mean, a couple people were right about them in terms of how are they going to do in the other stadium. But I mean, Vlad took his off season for real. Seemed like he came back in better shape. And I don't know if you saw these stats. At his age and at bats, he's like exactly on the same numbers as his pops, which was like legit crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, that was just like, wow, really. I actually like those two guys. I think Toronto may have some legs in the next few years. But historically, because those teams in Canada, like, I mean, name another Blue Jay, right? And I mean, Molitor's the obvious choice, but like even that is kind of hard. So I don't know. Like, although the Canadians right now they like their baseball for sure.
Yeah, and those guys I think are just built different.
Yeah.
I think they're in the limelight a lot more. I mean, I think their famous fathers, helped them quite a bit. I just, my whole thing around the under 25 types and look, I own all the players that you've mentioned. What I would say though is I've been really shedding a lot of my inventory around those players, even despite some of their success, because I just think that there's much better relative value plays in the market. Some of the players we've already mentioned. And, I think there's just
opportunity cost. Like, the question is like, if I shed a white jersey Acuna now, am I really never going to see one again?
Well, that's why. Look, I sold my 2018 Topps Chrome Juan Soto refractor. It was a pop 79 the other day. I paid I think 2,200 for it. I sold it for close to 4,000. I've got the Gatorade bath. That'll be that's the card that I'll own, and I'll ride that I'll ride that to zero, right? So like to me, that like where I've gone with like kind of my collecting outside of like the core guys is I'm gonna own one card of theirs. Like until they prove like without beyond a reasonable doubt that they're on the path.
All those guys we just talked about. I want to add two more, Devers and Jordan.
Yeah.
All these guys, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 9 guys. I think if you're opportunistic about them, right, where you can get into a decent card at a decent price and potentially ride a successful wave on them, whether that's a month or a few months or even a couple years, right? If you get in and out of them at the right time,
you
have opportunities to accumulate your bankroll for the one that you really decide you want later. And because you're ultimately going to decide, and this is part of what we were, trying to feature tonight, of those 9 players, the odds say only one of them is gonna be really, really good.
Well, here's a good exercise actually. Here's a good exercise, right? So if you look at the history of baseball,
we know it's not going to be all 9, and we didn't mention Wander Franco yet.
Well, no, so this is a good exercise for people when you kind of do this stuff. So there's been 22,718 baseball players of all time since the beginning of baseball, of which 268 have made the Hall of Fame as players. That's basically 1%. There are 906 players, I believe, that are in the major league. 916 or 906 players that are currently in the major leagues. If you just use the math from a historical perspective, that would suggest there are, and I think it's 1.2% or something. There are 11 players that are playing right now that'll be in the Hall of Fame, right? I think actually a really useful exercise.
And we listed 8 or 9 of them that are already guaranteed.
Well, let's go through that, right? So
Pujols, Cabrera, Verlander. I'm going to say Greinke, Scherzer, Kershaw, Molina, Trout. So you got 3 spots, and we've already said we like Votto, Altuve's maybe, Freeman probably,
Goldschmidt,
Machado certainly. We never even talked about
Harper.
We didn't talk about Harper. We didn't talk a ton about Mookie.
So I think you're right. No, I think
under that scenario, none of these guys are going to be good enough.
That's right. And I'd say if you're just playing like kind of the margin game, then what you said earlier is right. That of the 8 or 9 that we mentioned, there's one that's going to make it, right? And again, like for the prices that you have to pay for some of these rookies, I mean, like a Gatorade bag,
like you just described, $4,000 for a Soto. Like, I mean, there are really nice Ty Cobb cards out there for that. And I mean, he ain't ever going to be outside the top 5.
Well, I mean, you could. I mean, I don't know the Clayton Kershaw market well enough, but like you could probably buy one of Clayton Kershaw's best cards for $4,000.
Yeah, I would think. Yes.
Right. And so again, like my strategy, at least for these younger guys, has been like, and my strategy for if I was advising somebody to do this would be like, I collect these top flagship super short prints. Like that's And again, like if they don't have a rookie that's a super short print, like Fernando Tatis,
right?
I have his rookie cup. That's the super short print. Like that's now my play on Fernando Tatis. That at one point I owned a bunch of his cards, and like one of the biggest cards I've ever sold was a Tatis card. Thankfully, in the off season, yes, right. Yeah. So I think you're right, Dave. Like there are ways I think to play these markets and to like play the hype stuff and the momentum stuff. And I do think that if you're looking to have like more fun in the hobby versus just like things sit on yourself and collect dust, I think that's a great way to think about it.
I mean, listen, when we were coming into the season, I had made the comment. I was like, listen, if you believe in Acuna longer term than just the next 2 years, I don't know why you wouldn't be buying, because his prices had already suffered, right? Because he got kind of not written off, but a little bit out of mind, right? And it was like, hey, I just need him to get hot for a little while, and there we convene. So I think all these guys kind of present some of those opportunities. Like, I'll be honest, I'm worried about Lupoff. I'm
Yeah.
not sure the White Sox are going to be good enough to get into the playoffs and do anything. And if they're not, I mean, unless that dude hits 45, 50 homers, people are going to kind of look past it, right? And so
You know what's funny, that's a name that you haven't mentioned that I know you'll just roll your eyes when I say this, but for preparation for this call, I looked him up. Do you know who is like on his way to like a 7.5 WAR season and nobody's talking about?
I'll bet he's on my list.
Kyle Tucker.
Yeah. But he doesn't
You
hit.
know, I know what you're saying, but look, man, if he goes out and does that a couple years in a row, I
Yeah.
don't care what anybody says, he's going to be part of the conversation. And if the Astros trade him away, you know, and he goes to if he goes to another big team, I mean,
like,
that guy's going to play.
You know, he reminds me of, though, in a way, isn't he like the new George Springer?
Yeah, he is. He's like John Olerud. Remember him?
Yes. Yeah. So,
but anyway, look, I think that, you know, I know we're running out of time. I mean,
we've covered some great ground here. I hope we've given some people a few ideas and just giving you something to think about and kind of open the window a little bit to like how the sort of research that it takes just to even start to identify the players, right? We didn't even get in deep into any of the cards themselves, but listen, for me, that had always been a big part of it. I still think that that's super valuable. I think most of the research that people are feeding us in the hobby right now is really just, it's not even research, it's just regurgitating old card prices. And people actually think looking up pop reports is research. That's not how it's done. I don't, over the long haul, to be successful with this. And look, a lot of what we're talking about in baseball, you could transport it to basketball, you could put it in football. Hockey's a little bit different of an animal, but that it's that. And listen, your baseball prospectors kind of do that at the minor league level, right, before guys get into the majors, and and it's applicable there too. There's so much information now available, but setting the historical context even early in guys' careers, I think, should help people really be able to carve out collections and still navigate some of the investment flipping world of it to kind of empower you to throw it into the guys that you think that are really going to be relevant in the long term, right?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I mean, look, I think there's obviously one of the great things about the hobby is there's kind of no right way to collect, right? And you've made a life of it, and but you're also a very passionate collector, and you collect a lot of different things, and you collect a lot of different things very well. I'm a very kind of focused collector for other reasons. I think that one of the things that I do think that we want to impart on people, whether you've been at this for a while or you're just kind of coming in, is just like understand and appreciate kind of what relative value means in the hobby. Understand and appreciate as Dave pointed out in the front end of this conversation, like there are some kind of gauntlets that you've got to go through in some of these sports to kind of make it. And when you look at the stark reality of that calculus, it paints a pretty dismal picture for 99% of the players that enter the league. And so, like, unless you're going to be like at the roulette table and you've got like a bunch of funds to spread out and cover almost every single part of the table, and you're just looking to win it, hit it big on one or two players, this type of like primary research actually really does matter if you want to view this through the lens of something that you don't want to lose all your money. If this is just fun for you and you're just using disposable income as you were, and you don't have other obligations or whatever, then like more power to you.
More fun when you're not focused on value.
Exactly.
But where we're trying to impart is as the hobby has moved more and more towards the focus on value and less towards things like we talked about tonight, it is honestly, it is buyer beware. If you are going to drop $20,000 on a Vlad Guerrero Jr., whatever super duper fractor auto, and that's probably not even enough to buy that card. Just understand that you're foregoing opportunities to buy guys that ain't going anywhere, right? The Cobbs, the Johnsons, the Mathewsons, the Aarons, the Mays, the Mantles, the Clementis, the Mutuals, and that, I think you'll find over time that's a tough trade-off to make. And it is
well, and I go further. I mean, I go further to say even that,
right?
Yeah, look, and David, I'd go further maybe to say it this way too, right? Which is like part of like what's happened in this like the last couple years of this kind of card market, and really kind of any kind of collectible market gone crazy environment we've lived in, where all we really have to do outside of the last couple of months was to like stare at ourselves in the mirror or look at our phones endlessly, right? Because we couldn't interact with the other human beings. I think that it has like distorted our concepts of things like value, right? And like, unless you're like a multi-millionaire, okay, right, like $20,000 is a lot of money, right? Like $20,000 of in cash
is a lot of money.
Right? Like even if let's just say, for example, that you make $200,000 a year,
that's a ton of money.
That's a ton of money, right? And so, I think that one of the things that we want to just like make sure that we caution with people is that it's become somewhat commonplace for people to kind of throw $20,000 around for a can't miss prospect that's never hit above AA, or even some of these younger guys. I mean, it's see like a Soto Gold Refractor,
right? Yeah,
it's like there's a guy that I know on IG that's got a Soto Gold Refractor that he paid like $25,000 for, and like I can tell you, no matter what that guy thinks about Soto, like he's more nervous now than he was when he bought that card, right?
He's a lot more nervous.
And
there are a lot fewer buyers.
And there's a lot fewer buyers. And so I think it's just one of those things where I think it's just like, look, I do well for myself. My priority is taking care of my family. My priority is making sure that I have a nest egg for whatever kind of comes our way. I very much see cards as something to have fun with, but I don't want to be like, wasting money. Right. And, but the biggest card I've ever bought was like $15,000, and I like almost choked after I did it. Right. And so, and I see, kids spending $30,000 or $40,000 on these cards.
Starting to seem normal. And there's a good chance it could blow up, and that's as quick as somebody tripping over first base.
Well, yeah, and I think that part of the current hobby, part of the challenge, I think, navigating through this current hobby, and one of the reasons we want to do something like this, and I think other things around just relative value and contextualizing certain parts of the hobby for people, is that if you spend most of your hobby life on like Instagram, for example, and all you see are, chart after chart of, these 20 somethings going like to the moon and these huge returns, and you're never seeing a card go down in that frame, in that context, then I think there's something kind of, I think, that impacts you from a psychological perspective to think that that's going to be true for every card you put your hands on. And the fact of the matter is it's not.
It's just not. Yeah, it's going to be really rare.
So,
all right. So I wanted to wrap up one thing with this episode, just because it was a discussion that was interesting to me this week.
Yeah.
Where would you currently put Mike Trout in sort of the all-time list? Is he top 20, top 25, top 50, top
So
10?
I don't see it. Yeah. So I think that this is going to sound scapegoatish. The problem is the way in which you ask the question. So like the way I think the question we should be asking is, through their first 11 years in the league, where does Mike Trout rank? And I would argue that Mike Trout ranks as a top 15 player for his first 11 seasons.
Top
Like
50?
with almost without a doubt.
Maybe so.
I don't think it's a maybe so. He's averaged 9.6 WAR.
Yeah, but it's a focus on a singular thing, which is you already know the complaints that people are going to make about that, right? And they're going to throw back at you part of what I said. I'm not sure the other players are actually that historically good. And secondly, there's been literally zero playoff success. So like it becomes difficult, I think, for some people. I'm not saying which side of it I'm on. I'm just saying I think it's really difficult for some people to frame him up that way, until we get more info, and we've already got a lot. But so
Yeah, I mean, look, I
I
think
was
they're. I
interested to
mean,
see where you could, you as usual, you're going to ruin the fun because you turn it into something that isn't what I asked you. Because I was gonna start pitching names out to you, and you could tell me whether you thought that they were better. Because I think we'd find out pretty quick. He's not even in the top 50. He's not in the top 15. I can name 15 hitters that are better.
okay, go ahead.
Ruth, better.
Yeah.
Not even close. Cobb, way better.
Yeah.
Ted Williams, better.
Yeah.
And Williams wasn't even as good as he should have been because he served in the war. Hank Aaron,
Yeah.
Willie Mays. Like now, do I think he could end up in that stratosphere? Maybe, but that we got to get there. Stan Musial, better. Um, where would you put him relative to Pujols? I mean, right now Pujols is better, I think.
No.
As a hitter,
Through his first 11 seasons, no.
but that's not what we're talking about, Bill. We're talking about where they are today. If you had to put together an all-time rank right now, Pujols is
Yeah, but
better.
you're asking
I'm asking
you've got players
projection,
on that list. Hold on, you got players in that list like Ruth that played for more than 20 years. How many years did Hank Aaron play? 25 years?
like 24.
So you're going to tell me do I think that Mike Trout is as good as Hank Aaron halfway through his potential career? No. I mean, like, it's just a stupid question. It doesn't, you're comparing apples and oranges. You're asking me,
I'm not.
like,
That's how everybody does it now.
it would be
That's how everybody does
irresponsible.
it,
It would
Bill.
be irresponsible. It would be irresponsible if we were to say, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. Mike Trout's going to get hit by a car tomorrow and he'll never play a game again. And so like, that's his history is written, right? The reason why I have like such a problem, the reason I had such a problem with the question is because there were a lot of people last year that were writing him off.
For sure.
That were saying, oh, he's got this hamstring and he's no postseason success. He's always been hurt, blah, 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 blah. Right. And he comes out of the gates this year. And if he keeps it up, he might win another MVP. And then what? So if he wins a fourth MVP, is he going to start to be on that list?
No.
How many players have 4 MVPs?
I still have
outside of Barry Bonds. How many?
Bonds is better. Like if you put the steroids.
Yeah, of course. But like, how many people have 4 MVPs? How many people have 4 MVPs?
Tris Speaker. Like there's guys on my list y'all don't even like talking about.
How many people have 4 MVPs?
I don't know. I didn't look it up. There's got to be a handful.
I'll look it up right now.
Although it was shocking. Mays and Aaron only won 1 MVP each, I think. Or I'm sorry, Mays won 2, I think. Aaron won 1. They both also only had 1 World Series. Anyway, I was just interested to see where you go with it, and you goofed it up for me. So.
Well, no, because you're asking me to compare apples and oranges.
I'm telling you how everyone else does it, right? That's how ESPN does it. If you ask ESPN, Mike Trout's top 25 all time already. And I think that's not right, but I was just interested to see your take, and your take is like, way more research than anyone that isn't a full-time statistician has to do. So
No, that's not true. I think
I'm
it's
I'm
helpful.
not going back and copy pasting, 20 players' first 11 seasons to do that comparison. But if somebody else out there wants to do it, we're happy to have you on the show and talk about it. All right, what else we got? Anything else exciting in the hobby this week? It's been pretty quiet. PWCC had a couple, influencer hires, so we'll see how that works out. What
It's
else?
been pretty quiet other than
Yeah, there was a little bit of mess around some shill bidding, but some other people covered that. It wasn't that interesting to me, but the shill
no.
bidding's never interesting to me.
It's I think it's interesting. Here's my one observation about Carl, maybe the last 2 weeks, Dave, is that there are a couple of things that we haven't been hearing a lot about. The word invest, and they're tied back to words. Investment, stocks, NFT, crypto. It's kind of funny how that happens, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. And I think that what we hadn't talked about was the PWC auction that I think ended last week, where you saw some.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a bit of a mixed bag.
But yeah, no, I would agree with you. But I think what is notable though is that some of the bigger, what I would call like classically defined big modern cards, like the Luka and Patrick Mahomes RPAs,
yeah,
sold off by 50%.
Yeah, they were
and
soft in historical 2-year context. Yeah.
And these are and by the way, like those I think I know the Mahomes was like a pop 4 maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe the Luka was less than a pop 10. But again, like I think what it shows is like as pot like I saw the stat the other day around game 7 of the world, or what was it, game 6 of the World Series, and the 7th game of the basketball finals, or 6th game of the basketball finals. There was like equal amount of fans looking at those games, like the viewership. Like I think there's like this. I think that like, do I think that basketball, or do I think that football is more popular than baseball? I do. Right. Do I think that Patrick Mahomes RPA out of 99 should sell for $1 million? No.
Ever.
Okay. Never.
Not
on
unless
any planet.
Not unless
it ever exists.
Not unless it comes with a piece of Patrick.
And I guess my point is that I think that part of what I think that we're seeing is that all we've been led to believe is that the hobby has this like endless well of people that are lining up to buy these cards.
Yeah.
And the reality is, for pop 4 card, only one person showed up, and they're only willing to pay half of what the other guy paid, less than a year ago.
Yep.
And I think that should tell us a lot about these charts that people are showing in these popular sports that maybe aren't as popular as we think they are. Yeah. And clearly they're not as popular to assign a value that like is in excess of like 100 times what it would be in baseball.
Right. Now, I will say the one, I actually think this is the one kind of positive piece of news maybe for the hobby, broke today, right? Ruben is selling his interest in the company that owns the pro teams, the 76ers and the other, because it was creating a massive conflict of interest for him with the Fanatics. So him doing that is certainly indicative to me that he believes more in the Fanatics piece of this puzzle than, at least where he stood as a, minority level team owner. So
well, can I tackle that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. We're getting
I know
yes, go ahead.
What time are we at now? What time are we at?
We're going to be nearly an hour and a half.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. My only comment around the whole sports thing, having done some people that own shares of sports teams, is that sports teams, because of some outside influences, particularly out of like the Middle East and Russia, are highly inflated from a valuation perspective. And I think that there are some major kind of corrections that are in store for owning a sports team. And I think that Ruben's not an idiot and realizes that the much better diversified play is in Fanatics, and stripping his kind of interest when, you know, the market is still high, and carving himself out of whatever conflicts he thinks that exists is just a smart move.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any comment on all that. If you think they're going to take a hit, you should have obviously been advising the Walton family on their purchase of the Broncos. All right. Well, that's all I got, dude.
All right, man. Good times.
Yeah. We'll be back again soon. And in the meantime, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully gave you a few collecting ideas. And, yeah, we'll leave it at that. Cowboy
Happy
out.
collecting, guys. Take care. See you.